Good morning and welcome to the show. It is Medical Monday, and I have Dr. Roman Nation from Nation's Best Family Healthcare here in the studio with me today. Dr. Nation,
good morning.
Singular, not nations, because that's a common mistake.
Yeah.
I've even done it myself. I know, perish the thought.
It's all good.
But you do have Nation's Best Family Healthcare in Lynn Haven and now on Panama City Beach.
Yeah, we've been there 3 months now.
You know, we talked about last time about your typical patients, and it seems like there is no typical patient. You see them all, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, we do take the vast majority of them that come through. The gravitation of the patient population is kind of what you see in the news, is that the population is getting older. So we have quite a few more that are in their 60s and 70s and 80s. And I think Jim, today we were looking at his schedule, he's got 3 90-year-olds on his schedule.
And Jim Dees is your PA out
Yes,
there.
Sir.
He's got people in their 90s.
Yeah.
So
and we see those quite commonly.
They bring a whole new set of circumstances with them, don't they?
Oh yeah.
I mean, a whole new set of health issues.
For some that are in their 90s, they mentally they're in their 60s, and then we have others that are in their 60s that chronologically, based on all their conditions, they got bodies that are like 90 or 100 years old. So it varies from one person to the next on what's actually needs to be monitored with them. So
yeah, so aging is different in other people. In people.
Oh yeah.
I guess genetics plays a role in that, and lifestyle is a huge player in that, isn't it?
Yeah, there's a lot of overlap in that. Typically speaking, the folks who obviously, the stuff we always talk about, the ones who smoke and the ones who drink are the ones that are going to die off the fastest.
Yeah.
And they're also going to be the ones that have the fastest spiral down from the problems that they generate from
and
that.
they'll probably have the most expensive health care too on the way out.
Yeah, there's we fight that battle with the patients all day long, as far as patients are trying to get their premiums down so that they can be more affordable or have more discretionary money. Well, when they go through doing that, they end up losing services that they need as they get older.
Oh, geez.
One of those key factors is physical therapy. So we have lots and lots of folks that have falls injuries of one form or another, and they come in and they get seen, and so they injure themselves and they need some sort of rehab to make themselves better. And if they've downgraded to one of those lower policies, well, now they've taken their copay or their premiums from needing, from being a $20 visit to a $50 visit. Well, you multiply that over the course of 12 visits, it's got more than a car payment, and sometimes the size of their house payment is what it's going to cost them. So it's not always a smarter thing. The insurance agents will try and, they'll sell you whatever you think that you want if you're trying to get your premiums down, but they often don't, tell you what you're losing in the process. And that's a real key factor to keep in mind as you're getting older, because, if you're young and in your 20s, and you can injure yourself and probably will recover decently if you don't have, a formal rehab. But once you're in your 50s and 60s, you fall and you injure a hip, or, you have a knee replacement or something like that. There's a huge difference between somebody who goes through a good physical therapy program and those who don't. We facilitate as much as we can with that, but I can't tell you how many times that we changed the policy so that we could get our premiums down, and now half of the medicines that we're on aren't covered anymore. So and so they come in and complaining about that because they don't get that information ahead of time.
Wow, there's just so much to consider as you get older like that, and it's funny because people think of healthcare, they think of life insurance,
right?
But a lot of people don't think of long-term health care.
No.
I mean, does that factor into your thought process?
Yeah.
I mean,
and there's different insurance policies for things like long-term health care insurance policies, which is basically like I injured myself enough that I need to be in a nursing facility, and that's one set of things. There's a whole middle ground of like, I'm not sick enough that I need to be in a hospital, but I'm also not quite well enough.
You require a rehab facility or something?
In order to be at home, and there's this huge gap in the middle that a lot of times they don't cover, or they'll try and shave things down thinking that it's not going to happen to them, and it happens. We see it every week.
I mean, you go to a hospital and they tell you you're maybe terminal. There's not a heck of a lot we can do for you except go home and be comfortable.
Right.
And then you can't go home because you need round-the-clock care because you're so sick.
Right.
And then you wind up in a rehab somewhere, and maybe it's covered by insurance, maybe it's not.
Yep.
That's still a very expensive undertaking, Dr. Nation.
Yep. Yeah.
We got to run off to the
Sure.
weather here, but on the other side, I want to talk more about elder care.
Okay.
Because we have to face that more and more as we get older. Not me, of course. I'm staying young forever. We'll be right back after your Waking Up with Don weather. Welcome back to the show. I'm speaking with Dr. Roman Nation, and we're speaking about elder care and how important it is nowadays. You know, as you said early in the interview,
yes.
You know, America's getting older. I mean, we are.
Yeah, the population demographics, there's a growing population of older patients that are becoming less part of the workforce and more part of the healthcare needs. So that drives one thing in terms of the need for medical personnel in terms of jobs. But it comes down to who's paying for what and what's actually necessary. So we quite commonly see folks that are coming in and they're getting too old to live at home, but they don't want to leave because they have this whole thing about nursing homes and think that they're just going to push them off into the pasture and shove them in the corner until they die. Right. There's that stigma that's there, which is not true by any means.
Oh yeah.
And then the other part is that there's just so much as far as patients get older that they've gotten so set in their ways. I mean, you've heard that whole thing about can't teach an old dog new tricks. But they become so set, and the concept of changing something actually becomes extremely disorienting to them. And that's where you get similar stuff when you have patients that are in the hospital. They call it sundowner syndrome, where they start hallucinating and things like that. Some of that is because of the environment with the nurses coming in to check on them, but some of it is also the change in the environment because it's disrupted their routine and it's not familiar anymore.
Right, and sundown is basically when you're lucid in the morning and toward the evening you get a little less.
They call it that, but yeah, it's some of it is they're hallucinating in the middle of the night, so they'll wake up and they'll think that somebody's breaking into the house when they're actually in the ICU, or they're in there recovering from like their hip surgery and they start thinking that somebody's knocking down the door. Or we've seen lots and lots of stories over the years.
So they're just really disoriented. Is what it boils down to. And so what do you do with someone like that? And people of at least my age, I know you're considerably younger, but but I am remarkably immature. People of my age, are caught where you've got elderly parents. Yeah. You have kids in school, maybe.
Yep.
And you're kind
in-betweeners.
And you're in-betweeners, and how do people cope with that?
It varies from one family to the next. Yeah. We have a lot of coaching that we try to do with folks about, look, if you keep doing what you're doing, you're going to end up affecting your own health, and then you're going to be in the hospital too. So I quite commonly bring up to them, if you're not taking care of you, then who's going to take care of your parents when you get sick? So
that's right.
We have a lot of folks that, sometimes they take that advice and a lot of times they don't because they're so entrenched in, well, I got to do this because it's mom, or I got to do this because it's dad. And when really the answer is that once they get to a certain stage, then they are no longer self-sufficient and they need assisted facilities, whether it's assisted living or a nursing facility, those kinds of things. Ideally, the transition should go from being independent in your own home to an assisted living facility to later on in a nursing home. And there are retirement communities that are planned out there like that. But a lot of the vast majority of people that we know don't plan that way or think that way. They just don't do it. So, for us, in our generation, trying to get people to plan for that, and the smarter ones do. They know that, okay, once I get to this is where I want to go, and once I get beyond that, this is where I want to go. And so for the good planners, that's what they're going to do. For the other ones, they just wait.
We go through life on automatic pilot. I mean, we just do, just as humans.
Yeah. They wait until something bad happens. Yeah.
And everybody's going to die, so everybody has life insurance just about. Yeah. But nobody really thinks about long-term care insurance or what the next step is going to be.
Yeah, or even just long-term care, period.
Yeah, I have a great friend of mine who's like, well, I could be dead tomorrow. I'm like, yeah, or you could live another 30 years, and then what,
Yep, I quite commonly hear the concept of, well, I'm just going to die doing what I love to do. It's like, it very, very rarely happens that way. It's hardly ever that you see the gentleman that or the woman who who's a smoker or a drinker, not exercising, they're just sitting at home, and then all of a sudden they just wake up dead one day. I mean, that very rarely happens.
Yeah, it's funny because my dad, who is quite old, 88 years old, he says, I really thought I'd die peacefully in my sleep, and here I am circling the drain, clawing at the sides of the sink, and he says, now that's
what they do.
He's totally there. Yeah. His health is failing. But he knows, he knows that you're getting ready for the final roundup. You need to make some preparations, and probably, you've got to live a quality of life.
Or think about how you want it to end. And I talk to patients about that a lot, is like, how do you want it to end? If you're short-sighted enough to think that, I'm just going to keep doing it and wake up, stepping in front of a bus someday, that does not happen. I mean, and very, very, very commonly, even the folks who've had terminal illnesses that say, yep, I want to be on hospice, and they didn't actually die, all of a sudden it's like, wait a minute, I don't think I'm done yet. And then now they want other stuff done. And so it's like, think about those things and not ignore them.
You do need to think about that, Dr. Nation. And thank you so much for that sobering thought. It's like, who wants to live to be 100? Ask the guy who's 99. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Bobo with Gears Transmissions, and one of our customers' greatest fears is a check engine light. Most people don't really understand what a check engine light is. They know that usually when it comes on, you've got some kind of an issue with your vehicle, but there's a lot more to an MIL light than just that. Codes are set for a variety of reasons, and one of the biggest reasons why a code usually sets is electrical, believe it or not. So, when you have a check engine light come on in your vehicle, it's best not to always assume the worst. In most cases, it could pertain to some kind of an issue with a faulty sensor. It could be just a simple maintenance issue. It doesn't always mean gloom and doom. So if you got a check engine light on, don't do what most people do by taking a photograph of your children and putting it on the instrument cluster to kind of block the light out, or a piece of black tape. That's really not the way to go. The best way to go is to bring it here to Gears. We check engine lights for free. So if you got a check engine light on, bring your car up here. We'd be happy to check it for you. It doesn't always mean that it's going to be something horrendous. It's not necessarily going to be something that's expensive. Like I said, everything from an oxygen sensor to a spark plug to a coil pack, battery voltage can cause it. There's a lot of different things that can cause that light to come on. So if you do have a light, get it into somebody that's qualified to check it. And that way you know what's going on with your car. Don't just ignore it, because when you ignore a check engine light, you're asking for serious trouble. And that's my tech tip for the day. Once again, I'm Bobo, and if you want, please check us out here. That's Gears Auto Shop TV, YouTube.com, or you can catch us on Sunday nights at 9:30 on Fox 28. Thank you.
Welcome back to the show. I'm here with Dr. Aaron Shores from Spine and Neuropain Specialists right here in Panama City and also in Chipley.
Correct.
Doc, a lot of people talk about their sciatica. Like if you have a pain or unidentified pain, it's almost like the go-to kind of malady that people want to throw that tag on, like, oh, my sciatica is killing me. I got a pain shooting down my leg that's emanating from my back.
True.
Is it sciatica, or can it be something else? And what exactly is sciatica?
Right. Well, sciatica is generally an irritation of the sciatic nerve that causes nerve symptoms down the leg. And
that sciatic nerve, if that runs from your lower back into your leg?
Well, the sciatic nerve is actually a mixture of several different nerves, but the sciatic nerve doesn't actually form until around the level of the hip. So if there's entrapment or the sciatic nerve is pinched around the level of the hip, then sometimes, yes, it is truly sciatica. But a lot of times I find when patients come to my office and say, my sciatica is acting up, I find the large majority of cases are not actually sciatica. It's something else.
So sciatica, I guess the clinical definition is like an irritation or inflammation of the sciatic nerve?
Yeah, or compression of the sciatic nerve.
Or compression of
around,
that.
But the sciatic nerve forms around the hip, and anything above or below that, sometimes by definition, is not sciatica.
And for it to be sciatica, it's got to be chronic. It's not just like a one-time good deal, is it? Or
well, sometimes it can be acute. It can be, especially after trauma, it can sometimes be a new thing, for sure. And then a lot of times it can be chronic as well. But we find in our office, in our clinics, that patients oftentimes may have a pinched nerve in the back that's causing numbness or tingling in a leg, and it's actually a pinched nerve in the back, not sciatica. Or sometimes patients have joints in the back. There are several different joints around the hip and the low back that also can refer pain down the leg. So I try to educate folks that sometimes leg pain or low back pain, everything that goes down the leg is not always a sciatic or a pinched nerve problem.
What are some of the other things it may be?
Yeah.
If it's not sciatica.
Sure. No. There are several joints in the back. Some joints called facet joints. which are little hinge joints in the low back that are commonly affected, particularly if folks
Is
have.
that part of your spine?
It's part of your spine, and there are also joints called the sacroiliac joint or SI joint.
My aching sacroiliac. How many times have I said that when I was a kid? I don't even know what it is, but it just kind of rolls right off the tongue,
Right,
doesn't it?
exactly.
What is your sacroiliac?
It's a joint where your tailbone and your hip bone meet in the low back, and you have one on each side that can cause pain to go down the leg. There are muscles can do it. Sometimes discs themselves can do it without compression of a nerve. And then there are the hip joint and other muscles and bursitis and a few other nifty things.
So there's a lot of other, suffice it to say, it sounds like a really complex arrangement that you have in that area between your back and your hip. And it sounds like there's a myriad of things that could go wrong besides sciatica.
Right, correct. And there are a lot of them, you're right, they're very close together, and a lot of the structures refer pain in the same distribution. And that's why it's important to get evaluated by a physician or an expert in dealing with these ailments, because they're not always diagnosed on physical exam, and an MRI doesn't always tell the story either. Sometimes it requires some other techniques to figure out exactly what is causing someone's problem.
What are some of those other techniques? I mean, physically, you look at the person, here's where my pain is, and then you kind of narrow it down to that general area. Then maybe you do an MRI and you're looking for something that's visual. Lacking that, what's your next go-to?
Sure. Well, everything always starts with a good history and physical exam. I think that's probably a gold standard, and a lot of times you can get a pretty good sense on what's going on. But assuming the MRIs and X-rays and other workup is negative, sometimes it's trial and error. You know, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. You know, sometimes the only way to figure out exactly is it this joint or this nerve or that nerve is to go down and inject it or numb it up, and then reevaluate the patient immediately afterwards and see if they're better or the same. And if they're better, you assume you're in the correct spot, and if they're not, you recircle the wagons.
So it's really, for lack of a better term, like a process of elimination.
Sometimes it is, yes.
I mean, you try something and numb it up. If that's not it, then you go to the next thing.
Correct, and that's adds to the frustration, because sometimes it takes several weeks to be able to tease out exactly what structure or structures are causing the problem, which adds to the frustration of my sciatica is never going away.
Yeah, and it doesn't really give them any relief at that point, because that's what they're looking for. So rather than just give them a script and say, here, feel better, this will numb it up, you really got to identify what's going on.
Correct. It's always easier to treat something when you know what it is.
Dr. Aaron Shores from Spine and Neuropain Specialist in Panama City and Chipley. Thank you so much for coming on the show and getting us smart on sciatica.
Thank you.
And the sacroiliac. And we'll be right back. Welcome back to the show. I have George Arthur here in the studio. And George, what are you going to play for us?
Destiny, Don.
Well, take it away. Let's wrap up this show on a high note.
All right. First time I saw you, I knew I had fallen fast. You took my heart at that first glance. You looked at me with pretty eyes. I saw a flash of light. I would never be the same again. You said, what a nice car. I said, let's go for a ride. I hope this ride would never end. I knew you were my destiny. You were sent by God just for me. You would make my life complete. So the story goes, we talked for a long, long time. Both of us had so much to say. A time was getting late. I didn't want to let you go. I wanted to know if I'd see you again. We kissed in the moonlight, about to leave your side. We've been kissing ever since that first day. I knew you were my destiny. You were sent by God just for me. You have made my life complete. You are